you have a few different places where you can write your CSS. You can write it either in a separate file from your HTML, or you can include it directly in the HTML elements themselves. Let's look at where to write CSS before we actually start writing a ton of it. In a typical web project, you have a larger folder with the name of the project, which I've generically called website here, an index.html file that contains the HTML for the project, and a CSS folder that contains a file called style.css. I already have the index.html file open in Chrome, but there's currently no content, so we don't see anything. And I have the two relevant files here within my text editor, which is Sublime Text, and you can download yourself if you like, index.html and style.css, which is currently empty. In the HTML file, I've only defined a head and a body, but currently don't have anything in either. In the body, I can go and put a heading that says hello, and we'll just keep it really simple for now. That's all that we'll see on the page. And within the head, I want to define a link to my CSS style sheet so that all the styles that I write inside are therefore applied to my HTML. In order to do so, you'll use an HTML element called link. This is one of those elements where we don't need to have a closing tag. Inside the opening tag, I just need to put a series of attributes. The first attribute is the same attribute that's used when setting links in HTML, which is href. It stands for hypertext reference. This will tell our element where the style sheet is relative to this HTML file. If in our project structure, the index.html file is here, our CSS file lives inside the folder called CSS, and it has a name style.css. Therefore, I can write this href as CSS, which represents the folder that you just saw, a slash to represent now go inside the folder to a file called style.css. This is a very typical line of code, and worst case scenario, you can almost copy and paste it every time, assuming that your project is arranged similarly as a structure. The next attribute to set is type, and the value when you're talking about a style sheet will always be text/CSS. And lastly, the attribute we'll set in the last part here is rel equals style sheet. This attribute describes the relationship to the HTML document. And in this case, the document we want to link, its relationship to the HTML, is that it's its style sheet. This may seem complicated as a single line of code, but like I said, it's pretty standard in a lot of web pages. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add some quick CSS that would work on this heading that we have in the HTML document. We'll only set its color to green to keep things simple. I'll save that file and go back to Chrome where I have the index.html page already open. If I refresh the page, you can see that my header has appeared and it is now green. If I change the value of this color to blue and reload the page, the color changes. Now this is the most common way to include CSS in your project, by using this link element. However, sometimes you might see styles set directly in the head of the document itself without linking to an external style sheet. In this case, the style element is used, and it needs one attribute, which is type equals text/CSS, which is what you saw as part of the link element as well when linking to an external style sheet. Now the style tag does need closed, so we can add a style closing tag here, and within here you can write CSS as if you were in a CSS file itself. For example, H1, open that up, color blue. I can save this file, go back to Chrome, refresh the page, and even though I've taken out the link to my style sheet where I wrote that a header should be blue, I still have a blue heading because I specified it within the head of the HTML document inside style tags. There's one last kind of gnarly way to write styles, which is not to even deal with the head of the HTML document, but instead to write the style directly on the element. On this H1, for example. I wouldn't need to select the H1 because it's clear since we're working in the opening tag of the H1, this is the element I'm talking about, right? So I can use, instead of a style tag, a style attribute and set its value equal to the property and value I want to set in CSS. For example, color blue. Using the proper CSS syntax of a property with a colon at the end and a value with a semicolon, Save the document, and actually I'm going to change this to pink just so we can see an actual difference to be sure these styles are being applied. Refresh the page and my header is now pink.